I know you've missed me the last 2 weeks. I know you noticed that I didn't show up in your inbox with our pre-happy hour pep talk so that you could sound super smart when your friends and family asked you, what's going on with real estate this week? I know. I've been busy, but so have the news cycles, and no joke, so has the real estate market. So let's catch up. Before you dive into this week's blog, you're going to want to catch up on episode 1 of The Real Housewives of the Central Bank, my blog post from June 20th. That was last time that Trump was on the horn calling for Powell to be fired right after June Fed Week. He's back at it this week, accusing Powell of fraud to all the GOP lawmakers and then casually just walking that back the next day. The only problem is the mere suggestion of firing the Fed chair caused stock market volatility, a dip in the value of the US dollar, and higher treasury yields. Read a little jump scare with mortgage interest rates. Responses also came from Wall Street leaders like Jamie Dimon and David Solomon. They were adamant that Trump firing Powell would spark inflation and destabilize markets. Now, we've considered a significant component of Trump's strategy across the board might just be destabilization, like he's doing it on purpose. On the other hand, investors kind of hate political meddling with monetary policy, and both financial and political elites seem to consider the Fed's independence a pretty real line in the sand. My goal with today's blog is not to justify or debate Trump's tactics, but rather help you consider the realized and potential impacts of them. Powell probably stays, is the bottom line, at least until the end of his term in May of 2026. Even his potential replacement, Kevin Warsh, told CNBC yesterday that the Fed's independence from political influence is essential in preserving confidence in the nation's monetary system. So this tells us we will likely continue to see steady Fed policy, conservative, in response to growing inflation concerns. Meaning we're probably only getting those 2 rate cuts this year. They're going to come slowly. Reminder, Fed rate cuts do not directly equate to mortgage interest rates. So the Fed rate is not the rate you will get when you go to apply for a mortgage. That being said, Fed rate cuts do drive market sentiment, and that heavily impacts real estate demand. Take this current buyer's market that we're in, for example. It's actually the perfect example. It's really rooted in a moment of pause, just a slight hesitation from buyers and sellers across the country. It could end at any moment, closing a window of opportunity for buyers. 2 weeks ago, interest rates improved 1/8 of a point. The very next week, we saw a huge jump in mortgage applications. Just personally, I had 12 applications on Monday and Tuesday alone. So imagine what a Fed rate cut does to buyer activity. Considering 90% of Americans think that the Fed rate is the actual mortgage interest rate, imagine what happens when they hear about a cut. Now let's talk about future Fed policy. An especially important piece of Warsh's CNBC interview yesterday was focused on a more holistic framework for Fed policy. He discussed rate cuts, but also the balance sheet and how cutting both simultaneously would best stimulate the economy. Personally, and I know you were personally looking for my expert opinion here, I think that reducing the Fed's $6.7 trillion balance sheet will have a very real impact on mortgage rates. Warsh also wants to revive the pact between the Fed and the Treasury to coordinate the asset runoff with more clarity. When I said that the balance sheet impacts rates, I didn't say it would bring them down. The runoff could very well flood the bond market, creating a supply problem that drives mortgage interest rates up. Now, forecasting rates is always going to be a shitty strategy that I wouldn't recommend. You guys know how I feel about trying to catch falling knives, which is really what I equate trying to time interest rates and the market to. My advice is not to wait for a magical, potentially mythical rate cut from the Fed. I believe buyer and seller strategy should be to plan for volatility. Like that's it. That's the actual strategy. Plan for the market, interest rates to be volatile. For sellers, this means awareness. Awareness that your buyer pool is jittery, but still active. Here's 3 tips I have for my sellers out there today. 1, do pre-listing inspections so that you can get ahead of any issues and you can button everything up. Think of it like this. Your buyer, she feels like she's buying a designer bag. It's something she's always dreamed of doing. It feels luxurious, but it's expensive. Interest rates are high, prices are high. This designer bag, your house, is expensive, and she doesn't want to buy the one with scuffs on it. So take care of the scuffs. 2, don't test the market. We've already talked about this. You can reference previous posts, but price competitively and you're likely going to get more money than if you come on high. Be open to concessions because otherwise you're going to be publicly broadcasting price cuts and then buyers smell even more blood in the water. And then 3rd, ask your agent if their preferred lender has a list of buyers already pre-approved in your price point shopping in your neighborhood. My preferred partners ask me this, and then I share it with all my pre-approved buyers in that price range. It helps. In other news, I just came back from the Forward event, and I'm full of inspiration, but also real tactics and strategies. And I would love to share them with the entrepreneurs, the realtors, the marketers out there. So let me know if you want to get together and go over my notes. My favorite ones were on scaling by making the right hires. There's 4 specific ones. Using AI correctly in your content creation system and building real, like true, authentic confidence. I'd be happy to share everything I learned with you.